The coordinator of this conference, Dr. Hossein Zillur Rahman, would like to make an announcement.
Good afternoon. Welcome back after lunch. The books have arrived. 15 minutes after the start of the session, volunteers will start distributing the book from the back upward. Everyone will get a copy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start the second session of this seminar that is on urban poverty, access to services. We have 3 presentations, and we have also a very rich list of panel discussions. I think we don't have to actually take any time to start. I don't find any reason why I should introduce the session to you. I will straight away call upon Mr. Ambassador Liaquat Ali Choudhury for his presentation on service realities in metropolitan and secondary cities of Bangladesh. Mr. Choudhury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, you might be wondering why in this conference, which is focused on urban poverty, we are discussing about the urban service reality. In fact, one of the reasons why we are doing so is that PPRC and BBS have together collected a rich set of data on this particular aspect of urbanization, and it is a fact that with growing urban population, pressure on urban facilities are building up. And when pressure on urban facilities build up, it is the poor who are at a disadvantage, because the rich can afford it, but the poorer segment of the urban population, they cannot. In fact, if there is utilities and services in abundance, and if it is affordable, everybody can partake in that. But if it is scarce, it is the poor who really suffer. So in my presentation, we'll present some of the findings that we have had on some of the major urban services and utilities, which contribute to the livability of urban centers and the living conditions of urban population. In fact, with growing urban population, pressure on urban facilities in Bangladesh are building up. Providing urban facilities to growing urban population has become a major challenge. And what we have found is that in terms of availability and adequacy of these facilities, there is variation, significant variation that we see in the metropolitan cities, the bigger ones, and the smaller towns. And in fact, it is very, very important to understand that, why people are going to particular urban centers where they are not going to other ones, the smaller cities. First, let us look at housing. In fact, with growing urban population, pressure for affordable quality housing in cities in Bangladesh is building up. A key emerging constraint in this regard, of course, is the limited availability of land for housing purposes. And in fact, the emerging tenure patterns in urban centers in Bangladesh broadly reflect this pressure. More households in urban centers in Bangladesh today live in rented accommodation than in the past. In the table 1 that you will see next, you will find that. And in fact, we find that in the rural areas, most people, they live in owned houses, accommodations, but in urban areas, it is 50-50 in 2011. And the people living in rented accommodation in the urban areas is increasing because fewer people, less and less number of people are now able to afford owning a house. We will also find from the next set of tables that in Dhaka, more people live in rented accommodation than in Chittagong, and in Chittagong, more people live in rented accommodation than in smaller towns. This is all because of more pressure on housing in the big metropolitan cities compared to the smaller areas, smaller towns. And one interesting finding that we have had during the surveys is that I think those three tables about Dhaka, Chittagong, they are there. You find all these details that more people in Dhaka live in rented accommodations compared to Chittagong, and in Chittagong, more people live in rented accommodation compared to the Purushabas or the smaller towns. Then another thing that we found was that the residential mobility. It is more in Dhaka compared to Chittagong, and more in Chittagong compared to the smaller towns. What does that mean? In fact, that means that because of the pressure, because of the rising rents, households which were interviewed in course of our survey were found to have moved their residences more in Dhaka during the last 3 years prior to the survey than in Chittagong, and more in Chittagong than in the smaller towns. This is another very interesting finding that we found. Then we also had some very interesting finding on the quality of the structures also. In fact, there again you would see that in Dhaka situation is a little bit better in terms of quality of the structure than in Chittagong, and in Chittagong it is better relative to what is the situation in the smaller towns. More households in Dhaka live in Pakka structures than in Chittagong, and more households in Chittagong live in Pakka structure than in the smaller towns. And this is very interesting. But overall, you would find that in Dhaka, Chittagong, and in the smaller towns, it is the kancha or semi-pakka structure that most of the households live. That means that people are not that affluent that they can afford to live in pakka structures. Rather, they live in kacha or semi-pakka structures, implying that people are not affluent or rich in that sense to be able to live in pakka structures. And another finding that we found was that the jhupris, which are the very dilapidated sort of accommodation which are there in the slums and jhupris, these are not too many in Dhaka. But there might be some misrepresentation here, because this is the aggregate picture of the cities, metropolitan cities of the smaller towns. But if we focus on the slums only, the percentage might be quite high. So you have the percentages for Dhaka, Chittagong, and small towns there in the tables. And livability in cities, of course, depend on sanitation and garbage disposal also, whether people have toilets or not, whether they have good garbage disposal system or not. In fact, Bangladesh is fortunate in a way that in urban centers in Bangladesh, open defecation is not a major characteristics of the urban conglomerates in Bangladesh. This is a very good development. And in fact, in Dhaka, 97% of the household use different types of sanitary latrines. In Chittagong, it is 98%, and in the small towns, it is 96%. This is something very good. But as you would find in one of the subsequent presentation in course of the this conference, that although we have sanitary latrines for most of the households, how we deal with the waste generated from these latrines and toilets, they might be the contributing factor for many of the major health problems in the urban cities, how they contaminated the water system, sewage system, and things like that. There will be a very interesting presentation on that in our conference, I suppose tomorrow. Isn't it tomorrow, Jillu? Yeah. And then, garbage disposal pattern. Are our cities clean or not? Of course, it is not by international standard, by the standard of many of other countries which are in better position. And one of the reasons for this is that we do not have systems in place. In Dhaka, what we find is that some sort of community services have been developed by the citizens to take care of their disposals. The institutions which are supposed to deal with them, they are not either equipped or adequately funded, or they have the coverage enough to actually take care of garbage. So community service providers in individual localities, they are actually taking care of this, particularly in Dhaka. Almost 59% of the households that reported that their garbages are taken care of by community providers on the basis of payment. And this practice is picking up in Chittagong. Almost 29.7% of the households, they also reported that their garbages are picked up by community providers, paid by the households, not by the municipal corporations and things like that. And in the small towns, this practice is still at a very incipient stage. So you have the details in this regard in table 7 out over there. Then you might also be interested to know where do we stand in Dhaka, Chittagong, in some of the sample small towns that we have surveyed in terms of accessibility, access to electricity, access to gas for cooking purpose, and access to water. Access-wise, I think that Bangladesh have done an excellent job. In Dhaka, 99.4% of the households that we surveyed reported that they had access to electricity. In Chittagong, it was 99.2%, and small towns surveyed by us, it was 92.5%. But the main thing that we need to know is about the supply of electricity is something that about which the people are satisfied about. Do they have continuous uninterrupted electricity supply or not? There I think that our finding has not been a very encouraging one. In fact, in Dhaka, only 6.7% of the households reported that they have had continuous and uninterrupted supply of power or electricity. In Chittagong, it is even worse, 3.2%. And surprisingly, in the small towns that we surveyed, the percentage was 8.7. This, I suppose, and I'm afraid, may not be representative because of the smaller number of samples that we had. But if we look at another detail, we find that in the small towns also the things are not as good. In a small town, in Chittagong household, suffering from power outage up to 2 hours daily is 89.1%. In small towns, it is 35.5%. But in small towns, you would see that how households suffering prolonged period of power outages between 2 to 6 hours daily is almost 55.7%. So in excess terms, we have done well, but in ensuring continuous and uninterrupted supply of power, we have not done enough. And when this is the situation, of course, it is the poor people living in poor localities, I suppose, are suffering the most. Then comes the question of drinking water. Here again, nationally, our track record is not bad. We have good access to drinking water. According to the BBS population census of 2011, 96.9% of the total population Bangladesh nationally has access to drinking water. So this is a good progress. In Dhaka, 96% of the households have access to government pipe tap water in 2012. In Chittagong, according to our survey, it is 59.2%. The situation is not as good as in Dhaka. It is a little bit less favorable. In the small towns, we do not have access to pipe water comparable to Dhaka or in Chittagong. It is only 11.2% of the households they reported that they have access to pipe water. But this should not imply that in the small towns things are unacceptably bad because they use tube wells extensively. From tube wells, they're good drinking water. We are still analyzing our data from Dhaka and Chittagong because we want to see the type of water that they get from the government sources, public sources. What is the quality? And I think that from newspaper reports and elsewhere, there is great concern about the quality of the water supply that people get. And also the adequacy of water supply, whether what they get in terms of water from piped water sources, it is adequate to the need of the people. And if it is not, with the projected growth of urban population, I think that we have a big challenge in hand, both in terms of providing adequate water supply and also ensuring quality water supply. And in fact, I am from Chittagong, and I know that situation is very bad in Chittagong. Most of the day, people do not have adequate water supply, even when they have connection to piped water from public sources. Then let us turn to where do we stand on access to gas or gas for cooking purposes. It is available widely in Dhaka. In fact, 91.5% of the households that we surveyed, they reported that they have gas connection. And in Chittagong, it is 76.9%. And the smaller towns, most of the smaller towns, they do not have access to piped gas for cooking purposes. It is only 21.5% of the smaller households in the smaller towns that we have this type of thing. And there also, there are inadequacies in terms of supply, particularly in Chittagong and the smaller towns. Let us now go to educational facilities. Here, from our survey findings, I would like to highlight only one thing. Education is provided by the public institutions, private institutions, and a number of NGO-type facilities. In fact, the more dependence we have on private educational institutions has very profound economic implications. Because public educational institutions are the ones where people can have education at very low cost. But the private educational institutions are the ones where you have to pay a lot to have education. Where do we stand in terms of nature of educational institutions in Bangladesh? Apart from the primary level in certain cities, in the secondary, college level, and the university level, people have to rely more and more on private educational facilities, where they have to pay very heftily. And this is indeed a major concern for Bangladesh, because most of the poor people, they cannot afford education, because in the private educational institutions, the facilities are there, but the poor people cannot go there. And the other thing is that even when we have the educational facilities, in the institutional educational facilities, whatever education is imparted is not enough. People have to depend on coaching and extra educational institutional support. And for that you need money also. There also, I think that Bangladesh has a serious problem. When you have to depend on coaching, I think that it is the poor who actually, in fact, suffer the most. There are some other very interesting findings which you would find in our book. I would just like to make one observation on health facilities. In health facilities also, people have to depend on private facilities, which are expensive, and also private medical practitioners who charge heftily. So again, the poorer section of the population who suffer. And the other thing you would find, the private facilities which we have, in fact, they cannot cater to all types of needs of our population, urban population. For emergency purposes, if you need any help or assistance, you have to rush to the public hospitals where they have the capability to provide those type of services. But we have limited public facilities there. So I think that I stop here because there is a time shortage, and we have some very interesting finding on the transportation system, and there also you would find the need for improving facilities which would help the poor, not the rich. Thank you.
I'm sorry I did not introduce the chair. Professor Sikandar Khan is an eminent economist and currently the Vice Chancellor of East Delta University and President of Forum for Planned Chittagong. I now request the chair to resume the session.
With the permission of the chair, I just want to check if everyone has got a book. If not, if you raise your hand, someone has not received a book. At the front here, there's another 2. And all those who want a second copy, please, you can raise your hands, but it will not be given. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second presentation is on understanding the variation in health and nutrition outcomes in Bangladesh cities. This paper will be presented by Mr. Dushyant Raju. Mr. Raju.
Thank you very much for
Please.
inviting me.
In the World Bank.
So this is joint work with 2 other colleagues from the World Bank, Quinn Nguyen and Ramesh Govindaraj. I think I need a little help here.
Next slide, next.
Okay. Just a brief background on the study. So there's been increasing policy attention on healthcare provision and health outcomes for the poor in urban areas. Traditionally, Bangladesh has had a rural focus, and the literature seems to show that starting in about 1990s, practice started to move from rural areas to urban areas. And here in Bangladesh, it looks like research seems to have followed practice, but research has also been moving towards looking at urban health issues. But insights and relevance have been somewhat limited by data issues. One source of data are national household sample surveys, and they tend to be representative at the urban-rural split, or until very recently, looking at division splits, and then within it, urban-rural. So when you look at studies that look at urban health issues, they treat urban areas as an undifferentiated whole, or they look at urban-rural differences in health outcomes and health-seeking behavior. The other source of data has been these small convenience purposive samples in certain cities and towns in Bangladesh, predominantly in Dhaka and Chittagong, and then within these cities, certain areas, such as slums. The aim of this study is to explore the variation in adult and child health outcomes between and within urban slum and non-slum areas using recent household data. The household data that we use, it's a fairly large household survey. The advantage of the survey that we use is that it's representative within cities, looking at slum and non-slum areas. And it also has an extensive set of socioeconomic indicators that we can look at in terms of building a relationship with outcomes. Very briefly on urban Bangladesh, the official urban population share is 23% in 2011 based on population census data. That puts Bangladesh roughly in the middle of all South Asian countries in terms of the share that's urban. If we were to apply the same definitions that's been used in previous censuses in Bangladesh, the share is about 28%. Bangladesh has a fairly high population growth rate in urban areas. It's about 3.8% over the last 30 years. Projections by the UN indicate that by 2015, the majority of Bangladeshis will be urban. If we look at Dhaka, Dhaka is the 11th most populous city in the world. It's going to become even more. It's going to be the 6th most populous by 2030. So the study that we have looks at 6 city corporations. There are 11 city corporations now. In these 6 city corporations, about 38% of the urban population live there, and 65% of slum settlements are in city corporations. Chittagong, Dhaka North, Dhaka South, Ghazipur city corporations have the most slum settlements. Slum settlements vary in size. There are large slums, there are medium-sized, and there's extremely small slums in Bangladesh. They tend to be characterized by high population densities, a large share of rural migrants, poor public environmental services, particularly poor sanitation services, and poor housing quality. This is just a graphic that shows you the different divisions in Bangladesh. And the histogram are the shares of population, the shares of slums in the different divisions. And the little line that runs across the slides is the average number of households in a slum. And you see that the average number varies from in the 70s for Rangpur to in the 10s to 20s in Sylhet. And the vast majority of the slum population, slum settlements are in Chittagong and Dhaka. And this is based on official government information from 2014. In terms of urban health, if we were to put Bangladesh in an international perspective, Bangladesh tends to do if you were to rank Bangladesh amongst international countries in terms of urban, you will see that the poor tend to do worse in the poor rankings across countries than if you were to rank all the rich across internationally. This applies for things like stunting, and then when we look at obesity, the rich actually fare poorly internationally in Bangladesh. In terms of urban-rural differences, the direction of the difference depends on the outcome. Show you a graphic. We have two outcomes. On the left, you see overweight for women, and then on the right, you see stunting for young children. And the red line is for urban, and the green line is for rural. For overweight status, you see that the red line lies above the green line, so urban areas have higher likelihoods of overweight status. And then on the right, you see that stunting rates are lower in urban areas relative to rural areas. They seem to track each other over time. It's declining for stunting, and it's increasing for overweight status. Urban governments are responsible for public health services in Bangladesh. They are also responsible for preventive and curative care through public facilities, and they also license private providers. Institutional reviews suggest poor performance. It arises for a number of issues: capacity constraints, coordination issues, effort of government officials. There's been also an increasing role of NGOs in urban healthcare provision. So NGOs, they run their own centers. They also are contracted by the government for primary health care, and they also have a network of health and family planning field workers that service urban areas. Private practices and pharmacies are the main providers. If you survey households, they say that predominantly they access non-traditional practitioners. They go to pharmacies or doctors' chambers for their health services. The survey we use is from 2006. It's representative for 6 city corporations and a sample of municipal cities and towns. We exclude the municipal cities and towns in the analysis. And the survey was designed based on a population frame that they created, and it was based on using satellite mapping imagery and then also visiting the different locations to identify neighborhoods which had slum and non-slum areas. And it was a fairly large survey. They surveyed about 600 neighborhoods for the survey. The survey had 4 instruments, and we analyzed data from all of the instruments. There's a neighborhood questionnaire that was asked to local leaders. There was a household questionnaire that was assigned to be answered by the male head of the household, but typically the male head was not available, so it was answered by females. And then there was a female questionnaire, which was answered by women between the ages of 18 to 59, and if they were married, between 10 to 17, and they also answered for their children. And then there was a male questionnaire for the same age bracket. Overall, about 12,000 households were interviewed in the survey. We look at several outcomes, just looking at mean differences between slum and non-slum areas, and we do an in-depth analysis of selected outcomes. Most of these outcomes are constructed in very standard fashion. There's one indicator that we look at which is getting to be more important over time, which is mental health status. We basically created a linear variable for that based on the World Health Organization's 20 questions for depression and anxiety. And then we had a whole set of covariates. We had demographic and social and economic data. And we have 4 levels of data. So we have the individual, the mother, and the mother for young children, the household and the neighborhood. We had city corporation identifiers that we included in the analysis, and then also some variables we combined into index variables. So we constructed an index variable for housing quality. We constructed an index variable for neighborhood quality. Yeah. In terms of methods, very quickly, we look to see how much of the variation in outcomes is due to variation within neighborhoods versus between neighborhoods. We then look to see what's the relationship between covariates of interest and outcomes. And finally, we look to see what covariates actually matter more through a decomposition technique. This is the health status table for women. If you look at the first column called pool, this is all neighborhoods in the city corporations in Bangladesh. 16% say that they are unhealthy, 20% have suffered a serious illness in the last 2 weeks, 6% an injury. And as you go down, you see that on overweight status, 25% of women are overweight, diabetes, 12%, 20% suffer from hypertension. If you go to the last column in the table, it looks at differences between slum and non-slum areas. And you see by and large that slum dwellers do worse than non-slum dwellers, except for indicators such as overweight status, diabetes, and hypertension. Non-slum dwellers have higher rates of these types of illnesses. A similar table for men. Let's go to the last column here. Again, you see that slum dwellers, slum males, have poorer health outcomes than non-slum males. Interestingly, when you get to the bottom two rows, diabetes and hypertension, they seem to be comparable between slum and non-slum dwellers. We didn't see that for women. Women actually had higher rates among slum dwellers. You can't possibly compare between the two slides, but it looks like men actually have better health status than women do in Bangladesh on certain indicators. For young children, if we look at the pooled column, the first column, we see that 40% have been ill with a fever in the last 2 weeks. The diarrhea incidence is about 7%, stunting is about 60% in city corporations, and wasting is about 14%. If we shift to column 4, where we compare slum to non-slum dwellers, you see that slum dwellers tend to do worse than non-slum dwellers. We also tried to compare what the outcomes in urban areas were to rural areas. And you'll see that if we look at DHS 2007 data and you look at stunting, it's 45% in rural areas. And then if you look at the slum column, it's 70% for slum dwellers. So in some cases, slum dwellers actually do worse than rural residents, or they do equally worse. Let me just quickly go through this. We also looked at how the covariates differ across slum and non-slum areas. There are big differences in the levels of education between slum and non-slum dwellers. Antenatal and perinatal practices, they're worse in slum areas than non-slum areas. Per capita household expenditures are much lower for slum residents. And housing quality and neighborhood quality indexes are pretty large differences between slum and non-slum. Slum areas have worse housing quality and neighborhood quality. In terms of healthcare service delivery, just looking at the first column, the pooled column, you'll see that for private healthcare facilities, about 30% of neighborhoods have private healthcare service delivery. Most of it is through centers. And then when you get to the bottom of the table, you'll see that pharmacies service about 75% of neighborhoods and qualified doctors about 46%. So that's predominantly the story you find in urban Bangladesh, services by the private sector. And then when you look at differences between non-slum and slum areas, in terms of government and NGO service delivery, there isn't much difference between slum and non-slum areas. What seems to be differing is on the pharmacies that are available, as well as qualified doctors, and to some extent the presence of government field workers, which tend to be mostly in slum areas. Looking at the variation between and within neighborhoods in Bangladesh, we have for women on the left and for young children on the right, and we have three health indicators: underweight, overweight, mental health status, and stunting, wasting, and diarrhea for young children. And you'll see that the blue bars are between neighborhood variation, and the orange bars are within neighborhood. So the bulk of variation in health and nutrition outcomes tend to be within neighborhoods. So if you were to go to a slum area and you look across children in the slum area, there's a bigger difference there than if you were to look across slum, non-slum boundaries. In terms of results looking at the relationship between covariates and outcomes, all of the covariates had some significance in some regressions. So they all tended to matter to some degree. But the ones that consistently mattered at the individual level was the age of the individual, mattered for their health status, in slum areas, in non-slum areas, and across all neighborhoods. The levels of education mattered quite a bit. The mental health status of the women mattered quite a bit for child health outcomes. So the worse the mental health status, the worse children's outcomes were, both in slum and non-slum areas. Underweight status also mattered for children. The underweight status of the mother mattered for children. In terms of household status variables, household economic status, so this is the consumption expenditure of the household, had a strong relationship with health outcomes in slum and non-slum areas. If the household had suffered a food shortage in the last year, that also matters quite a bit for child outcomes. And then we also find that environmental quality of the neighborhood matters, and so does the healthcare service provider availability, but that's much less than variables such as the education of the individual or the consumption expenditure of the household. Once we control for all of these factors, the distinction between slum and non-slum falls away. It doesn't matter as much. It indicates that all of these other covariates matter in influencing the relationship that we find unconditionally between slum status and outcomes. But even controlling for all of these factors, city corporations continue to matter. So Dhaka continues to be significant relative to some of the other divisions, and similarly when we look at other divisions. So there's a lot more digging that needs to be done separately, looking at Dhaka separately from Sylhet, and Sylhet separately from Chittagong, etc., in doing these types of analyses. And finally, in terms of the decomposition results, very quickly, what seems to matter in looking at differences between slum and non-slum areas is basically the levels of the various covariates that we have. So the levels of mother's education matters, not so much the return that you get from mother's education. The levels of consumption expenditure matter between slum and non-slum areas in explaining outcome differences, not so much the return you get for consumption expenditure. And we find that to be consistent at the aggregate level, but also at the detail level when we look at specific covariates. It's the levels that matter more than the effects that you have from these levels in the regressions. In terms of ongoing analysis, there are three pieces of analysis that we're doing right now. We're using more recent data to look at the slum, non-slum gap in child nutrition outcomes. We're also looking at how child nutrition outcomes have evolved over time between 2006 and 2013 and decomposing that change for slum dwellers. And finally, we're looking at education outcomes as well, looking at differences in education status between slum and non-slum areas and decomposing those changes, as well as attainment for young adults using the more recent wave. Thank you.
Your nice presentation. The third and the last presentation is on challenges of pro-people mass transportation in Dhaka city. It will be given by Professor Akhtar Mahmood, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Jahangirnagar University.
Okay, thank you. My name is Akhtar Mahmood, as you heard. I'm teaching in a public university. Besides, I am General Secretary of Bangladesh Institute of Planners, and I have interest on mass transportation, walkable city. So eventually, I come up with a paper that is challenges of pro-people mass transportation system in Dhaka city. And it was supported by PPRC. Let us consider some facts of Dhaka city as far as transportation is concerned. We have only 7 to 8% of road space out of total city to serve 15 million of people in transportation sector. And but we don't have any organized public transportation system. And around 1,400 bus owners, they are operating in this city for providing public transport. Yeah. In the revised STP, which is under preparation, in 2016, we find around 30 million total trips, daily trips, and that people made, and 47% of the total trips are satisfied by public transportation, that is public buses and minibuses, 9% by car and 32% by rickshaws. So it's a city where you can also find non-motorized transport. And this city has road-based, mainly road-based transport system. And we know the situation of transportation system, so congested and traffic jams. Annual loss caused by traffic congestion in Dhaka city is around 200 billion per year, and about 3.2 million business hours are lost due to traffic congestion in every year. In this research work, I tried to focus on what kind of transport modes are necessary for Dhaka, and where we are standing today after promising so many things to implement in STP, and will the current mega projects like elevated expressway, flyover, and that have been planned for coming years can mark a major impact in current traffic situation of Dhaka city, and what to do next. There are some important facts in Dhaka city. 76% travel shares are short distance, less than 3 kilometers. 35% of total travel shares are made by rickshaws. 48% of total travel shares either by foot or non-motorized vehicle. 44% travel shares are made by bus, and 8% use motorized non-transit, that is car. So we need to actually translate it into space. That is important. And if you see the road characteristics of roads, primary roads are only 200 kilometers, which is 6.66%, which is suitable for public transport service, and rest of the part are either secondary road, feeder road, or narrow road. Only 400 roads have regular footpath, although we know the condition of footpath. Most of the footpaths are occupied by street vendor, garbage bins, construction materials, and shopkeepers. So how can we expect a pro-people transport system? If you see this table, only 4% people are in the share of high income group, and rest of the 96% either in the lower income group or middle group. So mostly the mass people have to depend on the mass transit. But what we see in the traffic composition, let's see. If you see the vehicle registration trend in Dhaka city, 23% are private car, and bus and minibus, 6% buses, minibus are only 1%. If you see the vehicle registration trend of Dhaka city for car, in the last 10 years, every year it is more than 10 to 15,000 per year, and on an average we calculated 50 cars are registered daily in Dhaka city. So it's a big constraint for planning in the transport sector. We made some primary surveys in some selected routes. We selected 4 routes: Uttara to Saidabad through Badda, Gaptoli to Saidabad, and Mirpur to Mirpur Farmgate Gulistan route, and then Uttara to Motijil. These 4 are major route for public transportation. And we calculate the volume survey, and we prepared some delay mapping on these routes. This is Abdullapur to Saidabad route via Badda. It's a 21-kilometer length of route, and speed level is 7 kilometer per hour. And if you see the circle, all these circles are the intersection. On an average, every route has 20 to 24 intersections, which are badly designed so that we can see the traffic congestion in every intersection. And the circle represents the time of delay. Bigger circle means the bigger time it takes to clear. And some of the point, it takes 20 minutes. And one of the major challenges to increase the speed level. You know, in Dhaka city, in this route, it is 7 kilometers per hour only. And to reach Abdullapur to Saidabad, sometimes it takes 3 hours. It is Abdullapur to Motijil via Farmgate. And in this route also, we can find 8 to 9 kilometers per hour. And this survey was conducted in 2012. After that, we get one flyover in Kuril Bonani. And this flyover contributed just to shift the traffic jam to Chairmanbari, Bonani, Mohakhali, and Prime Minister office. So all this portion is stuck with traffic jam in the working hour. This is Gaptoli to Motijil. Length is 14 kilometer, and average speed is 9 to 10 kilometer per hour. Next comes Mirpur to Motijil route, 15 kilometer, and average is again 9 to 10 kilometers. So all these 4 routes less than 10 kilometer per hour. Our challenge is to raise this speed level. Only? Okay. Traffic composition. We calculate traffic volume survey and traffic composition, and we found car is the dominating in every point. Bonani, Biman office, and then where is then Public Service Commission, Rokeya Sharani, everywhere. And this is PCE value in 9 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 points. We saw it is more than 2.5 times than its carrying capacity. In every route, the traffic volume is more than 2.5 times than it can carry. What was the major commitment in STP? 3 bus rapid transit, 3 mass rapid transit, pedestrian priority, 50 road projects. Average speed is to ensure average travel speed of public transport. So there are a lot of commitment, but what was the progress? Only few flyovers, which is overpass mainly, and some of the road bridges, road projects and bridge projects. that has been completed in the last 8 years since the STP was approved in 2008. And now we can see some of the ongoing projects, like one mass rapid transit, that is MRT6, and one BRT, which is partial, Gazipur to airport only. So this is our only progress. Where are we today? By this time, we should have complete 3 BRT lane, but we couldn't make it happen. Now it is revised STP. Revised STP is quite different than the previous one. And here we see 5 MRT and 2 only BRT. And BRT is more easy to construct, more easy, it is less expensive, and it can serve a lot of people. There are 3 ring roads proposed, which is 310 kilometers in total. The first ring road, then second ring road, and third ring road. And there are 8 radial roads, and then expressway. So in revised STP, we see the combination of lot of mega projects, but where the pro-people transport system. We don't see much about pedestrian way, footpath, or making a walkable city, or BRT, or affordable transport system. So my recommendation will be discouraging all auto-oriented transport infrastructural investment, infrastructure complementary to BRT and mass rapid transit can be continued, implementation of 6 mass transport lines in planned time without any delay, and invest more on pedestrian facilities. And I conclude with a demand: an affordable mass transport system, pedestrian priority and pedestrian friendly city, reducing low capacity transport, and simultaneously increasing high capacity quality transport to meet the passengers' demand with the limited infrastructural support, facilities for pedestrian, and NMT vehicles must be provided with the due importance. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahmood, for finishing in time. We are actually running very short of time. As I told you, we have a very rich panel of discussants. I am constrained to actually request them to remain limited to 8 minutes each. I'm sorry that I have got to say this. Our first panel discussant is Professor Abul Kalam, President, Bangladesh Institute of Planners.
Honorable Chair, distinguished guests, and honorable participants, good evening, in fact, good afternoon. The three presentations highlighted some of the problems, existing conditions, and the problems of the urban areas in Bangladesh. I thank all 3 presenters for their nice presentations. In the first presentation, Ambassador Liaquat Ali Chowdhury presented raised some important issues on housing, quality of water supply, education and health in the urban areas of Bangladesh, and ensured the differences between the bigger cities and the smaller cities in Bangladesh. Obviously, we understand that the bigger cities have better infrastructure, better institutional capacity, so they probably, and also the policy attention is better in the bigger cities in Bangladesh. The smaller cities have lower capacity. Obviously, they have lacking in different areas: the manpower, the financial resource, the technical capacity, and also understanding on the urban development, the plan development, the integrated development, etc. So the differences we find is obvious. And in Bangladesh, we know that the planned urban development is relatively a new phenomenon. Although in some big cities we had master plans since 60s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, but in the smaller cities, we only recently started to have the master plans. So I call it a first generation master plans that we need to begin with practicing integrated and resilient urban planning, so that we can accommodate the needs and aspirations of the town dwellers in the master plans, in the practice of master plans. And the Paurushobhas are also weak in their capacity. So the institutional capacity that needs to grow. And we need to allow them time. The national government, the donor agencies, they also need to focus more on the urban governments, both the major cities and also to the small cities. Since the population in the urban areas is growing faster, so definitely we need to focus more on that area. Unfortunately, in Bangladesh, the capacity of planning and maintaining the urban areas is not getting that focus which is needed to address the issues of the urban areas. The urban areas is contributing more and more in the GDP. The planning could do more in this area, in this respect. So, if we see the conditions in the urban services, the situation is better in Dhaka, then followed by Chittagong, Khulna, and obviously the smaller cities have a limited capacity to deliver required services. So the findings and the observations are quite obvious. And similarly, in the health and the nutrition matters, the paper are mainly focused on in the slum areas. And we can see the similar results also in that paper. So we need to address these issues, and to do that, we need to focus, obviously, why the institutions in the urban governance are not being able to address all the issues, all the services they need, these cities and the towns need. What are their potentials that they haven't exploited yet, and what are their weaknesses that need to be addressed. So I find the institutional capacity definitely in the small urban centers, the Paurasabhas basically have not the institutional capacity which is required to deliver services. And they have the financial constraints, which, because of the practicing over a long period of time, they are not being able to mobilize their local resources. They cannot increase it or expand it. So in that area, the national government need to focus more how to increase the capacity of the local institutions, especially the urban local institutions. Why the mayor are failing to lead in the local area? Why the councillors are not being able to understand the requirement for integrated and planned development? The donor agencies are trying to implement through governmental agencies many projects, and from their studies and the projects, we can understand the level of capacity they need to develop. For example, the Paurasabhas, the city corporations have the master plans, which are still draft. Some are being approved by the national government already. But if we see that who will implement that master plans, whether they have the technical capacity to do that, whether the mayor and the elected representative, they understand the, what is written in the master plan, what is meant by integrated development, and more recently, what is meant by resilient development, climate change, disasters, etc. And the sufferers of these weaknesses are the poor. So the poor suffers more from all sorts of incompetences, weaknesses, and inadequacies. So coming to the our mass transit, we understand that the mass transit is obviously needed in a city context. For a city like Dhaka, it is more important how we move, keep 16 million people moving every day. So we haven't thought much on that. Well, we thought, but the execution is not there. We should have had already double-deckers on the road. So if we consider all the buses are made double-decker today, what we can do, that we can carry at least more than about 2.5 times more people just today. So that's the way the Singapore, that's the way I think the Hong Kong made a city moving. In Hong Kong, every buses, every trams are double-decker. Also, they have the metro, the subway, they have everything. So we should have started that much before. So we need to focus there more. Thank you all.
Now is the turn of Engineer Muhammad Nurullah, Chief Engineer, Dhaka South City Corporation.
Honorable Chairperson, Professor Sikandar Khan, and Mr. Hossein Jillur Rahman, coordinator of this session, and the learned audience, because I see a lot of actually faces, all are actually very potential in their field and working in these areas, actually multi-dimensional areas. First of all, I thank the PPRC, actually the leading, and especially Dr. Hossein Jillur Rahman and the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, the government organization, and the development partners for this issue actually, especially the in-depth seminar, 2 days seminar, only the urban poverty issue. Here 3 presenter actually highlighted 3 topics. One, Mr. Liaquat, service realities, and his paper actually highlighted the service issue of urban centers, actually the housing, residential mobility, quality of structure, sanitation, garbage, access to electricity, water and gas, everything. And Mr. Raju actually highlighted the understanding the variation in health and nutrition, and he actually highlighted some of the indicators of slum and non-slum areas actually. And finally, Mr. Akhtar Hussain actually a in-depth analysis of the STP, RSTP and the present scenario of the mass transportation actually. I was actually the additional chief engineer of local government engineering department LGD, and I look after the urban sector. Based on that experience actually, I took some few points about the urban poverty. The service reality, all the issues actually, and the organization, government organization, NGO and development partners to the project modality, we do lot of actually activities to reduce the poverty in our country, and we achieve a lot. In last 7th 5-year plan actually, because I actually talk about the action oriented activities, not the analytical part. And in 7th 5-year plan, I look through the document only the strategies for reduction of urban poverty, and in the top level actually the government strategic policy level, there is no gap actually. They very much enriched to do all of the activities in, to reduce the urban poverty, and I quoted some of the strategies. 13 strategies actually in the 7th 5-year plan specifically to cover the urban poverty. Easing access to land and housing, a special zone for the urban poor, and the need for in situ upgrading and improvement of slums, low income housing loan, rental housing, ensuring access to infrastructure and services, ensuring access to income and assets, supporting informal sector activities, providing access to credit, providing training and capacity building, supporting home-based income generating activities, providing social protection, providing land for business operation. Everything is covered there. Mr. Liaquat actually highlighted one term, that is the community organization, and in our cities actually some of the community organization in different areas working, but they are not coordinated actually. To address the urban poverty, in my experience, the community organization first needed, and our household income and expenditure survey conducted by the BBS actually, the latest document actually, we get all the poverty scenario there. To do the activities, we have the actually organization, the government organization, the department, ministry, the department, and in the field level, the some departments and also the local government, urban local government especially, and they are very much the in my sense, this is my personal opinion, the organizations are good, but the question is the organizational capacity and the man who run the organization, his personal capacity. So, if we have the very strategic decision about this poverty issue, but now it needs to the function of the ministry to actually linkage the departments, that is the government organization and the local government institution. I means the urban local government institution means the municipalities and the city corporation. So it needs the capacity building of the organization itself, as well as the person who actually work in that organization to took the responsibility of the urban poverty. So it requires the actually very specific guideline to use in the field level. So I request our honorable actually sir Mr. Hossein Zillur Rahman and also the development partners actually you did a lot in our country, and especially I here the UNDP actually the projects already completed, and that was a very good intervention actually in the municipality area. So we have the document in segregated way actually. So nowadays actually if we prepare the document and it will utilize in the main actually implementer, we consider the local governments actually urban local governments, that will actually give the synergic activities to reduce the poverty. Another actually by my understanding is the government also took very interest about the actually the planning of the cities and the municipalities and as a whole countries actually. Now in our 7th 5-year plan actually cover there is a actually point to cover the whole nation actually, the whole Bangladesh for the physical planning actually. The government also took initiative, took the GED also. So for the utilizing the actually planning concept, we actually mitigate lot of urban poverty issue, especially the mixed use of the land use actually in the cities. And Mr. Akhtar Mahmood actually written a article in Dhanmondi and he highlighted the mixed use actually. So if we actually utilize our municipalities and the cities in the mixed use, and within the mixed use, lot of the actually the low income people actually engage for the business and other service purpose, and which actually mitigate the poverty issue. So I again I thank to Mr. Zillur to invite me here actually for this international conference, and I think that in future we will actually actively work under this umbrella, and the solution which actually come in this seminar will be utilized in our actually agencies and also the urban local government institution. Again, thanks you all.
Thank you, Engineer Nurullah, for the nice presentation, discussion. I shall now call upon Architect Mubashir Hussain. He is a well-known person. I shall request him to please give his telling.
Ladies and gentlemen, especially the foreign delegates, I prefer to speak in Bengali because I am very poor in English. Sometimes I will use few English words, so I beg my apology to you. আমি দুটা ঘটনা নিয়েই বলবো, একটি হচ্ছে ট্রান্সপোর্ট এবং হাউজিং নিয়ে। এটা শুরুতে যদি আমরা একটি জিনিস মেনে নেই, পৃথিবীতে এখন ডিস্টেন্স মাপা হয় the time. The time is the essence of distance. 10 minutes walk, 20 minutes flight, 5 minutes drive, this is the distance. So if we remember all these things, we can sort out a lot of problems. এখন আমি শেয়ার করব প্রথমে স্লাম ডুয়েলার্সদের ঘটনা নিয়ে। I will share my personal experience. When I was working for British Embassy, আপনার কি বলে ঘূর্ণিঝড়ের জন্য যে আশ্রয় কেন্দ্রগুলি করা হচ্ছিল ব্রিটিশ এম্বাসির জন্য, আমরা সেই কাজগুলি করছিলাম। করার সময় ওখানে যে ফার্স্ট সেক্রেটারি ছিলেন, হি টোল্ড মি দ্যাট মুবাশশির, ডু ইউ নো মাই ড্রাইভার ইজ পেইং higher rent than I am paying in Baridhara. I could not believe it. Then he started explaining the whole thing. তার ড্রাইভার একটি ঘরের একটি বেডে থাকে, কমন টয়লেট ইউজ করে, কমন কিচেন ইউজ করে, এবং সে যে টাকা দেয় পার স্কোয়ার ফিটে, তার স্কোয়ার ফিট মেপে, which is much higher than the rent he is paying staying in Baridhara. I didn't believe it. So what I did, আমার গোপীবাগে একটি পৈতৃক সম্পত্তি বিরাট ছিল যার ব্যাকইয়ার্ড বেশ বড়। I spent 35,000, it's in 90s, 35,000 rupees ব্রিক ক্যান মার্ট দিয়ে দেয়াল তুললাম, কোনো প্লাস্টার নাই, কোনো কিছু নাই, ফ্লোর নাই, টিন কিছু বাঁশ দিয়ে টাঙিয়ে দেওয়া হলো। Only I provided quality water supply and sanitation system. Within 15 days, what happened? It becomes a big queue. And there was a lot of open space so then they can have beautiful sunshine. And every month I started getting 30,000 rupees, investing 35,000. সেখানে আমার যে অভিজ্ঞতাগুলি হলো, এগুলি আমার মনে হয় আপনাদের জানা দরকার। সেখানে একটি বেড, এমনকি একই রুমের ভিতরে ফিজিক্সে এমএসসি করছে, হি ইজ স্টেইং অ্যাট দ্য সেম টাইম ইন দ্য সেম রুম অ্যানাদার পার্সন ইজ স্টেইং, সে মতিঝিলে গার্ড হিসাবে কাজ করে, দে আর স্টেইং ইন দ্য সেম রুম। সে গার্ড আবার তার রুম রেন্ট কমানোর জন্য শেয়ার্ড উইথ অ্যানাদার পার্সন, সে দুপুরবেলায় সেখানে খাবে এবং গোসল করার একটি সুযোগ পাবে। That was the situation, and now it is more dangerous. Actually, আমরা যে স্লাম ডুয়েলার্সদের কথা চিন্তা করি, they are not spending less money, এবং তারা স্পেন্ড করছে অনেক বেশি পার স্কোয়ার ফিটে। আমরা যদি তাদের এইখানে যদি স্লাম ডুয়েলার্সদের জন্য উন্নত অবস্থা করি, সেগুলি তারা কিন্তু রেন্ট আউট করে দিয়ে আবার ওই অবস্থায় যাবে। তাহলে সলিউশন কি? ওই যে শুরুতে যে আমি কথাটি বললাম, দ্য ডিস্টেন্স, আমরা একটি হিসাব করে দেখেছি, আধুনিক যানবাহনের কথা যদি চিন্তা করি, বাংলাদেশের এটা একটি ঐশ্বর্য, ইটস এ গিফট ফ্রম দ্য নেচার অ্যান্ড দ্য গড। ফ্রম এনিওয়্যার ফ্রম বাংলাদেশ ইউ ক্যান রিচ ঢাকা উইথ দ্য মডার্ন ট্রান্সপোর্ট সিস্টেম বাই 2 to 3 hours. So one thing, decentralize or have the excellent communication system. একটি কথা আছে কলকাতায়, daytime population is double the population of nighttime population in Calcutta. That means in daytime surroundings villages থেকে thousands of people used to come to Calcutta to serve, and they left Calcutta in different times. So we have to think about it. এখন আসেন, why we are so much interested about so-called flyover? Let us think about one thing. We have a 1-inch water pipeline. In the middle of it, we just cut it and put a 10-inch dia pipeline. Are you going to get better water supply on the both end? You cannot. But we are doing the same thing so that Mubashshir can drive on top of that. That is 5%. The 5% to 8% people have motor car, and they are using that. And not only that, very interesting thing, this is only in Bangladesh happening. 3 or 4 organizations, government's ministry, rushing towards having the flyovers permission so he can construct it. I think সারা পৃথিবীর কোথাও একটি শহরে বিভিন্ন প্রতিষ্ঠান প্রচণ্ড গতিতে ফ্লাইওভার বানানোর জন্য চেষ্টা করছে, এই অভিজ্ঞতা আমার নাই, এবং আমার মনে হয় আপনাদেরও কারো নাই। চিন্তা করে দেখেন, রাজুককে যখনই আপনি বলবেন রেগুলেটরি বডি হিসাবে তুমি সাকসেসফুলি কাজ করো, রাজুক বলল উই ডোন্ট হ্যাভ ম্যান পাওয়ার। বাট নেভার এভার দে সেড উই ক্যানট গো ফর ফ্লাইওভার বিকজ উই ডোন্ট হ্যাভ ম্যান পাওয়ার। They never said we cannot go for plot distribution because we don't have manpower. They are very much interested about these two things. Not only that, LGD, they are supposed to work outside Dhaka city. They got the biggest so-called flyover. On top of that, few of us used to drive fast and then stuck up at the end. So the planning, through planning, we can solve a lot of problems. Proper planning, the existing situation can be converted in a better way. We are talking about public transport. আপনারা যদি দেখেন সেক্রেটারিয়েটের সামনে দেখবেন all the double deckers of Bangladesh government financed by a poor beggar, because he also pays the tax through buying a matchbox, used to pay the VAT. Those multi-story double-decker buses standing from morning till evening only for 2 trips, bringing the officials and taking them back to office. I found 21 double-decker buses standing there. Not only that, if you go near to the Karjan Hall, we can see exactly the same thing. Double-decker buses standing there for students once and twice. They just drive. And hundreds of people are standing, queuing on the road in the rain and in the sun. They don't have proper bus. You have buses, je busgulir chamra nai, mangsho nai, haddi nai, those are running in Dhaka city. The city where Prime Minister, President, and Chief Justice is to stay. So if we go for a proper planning, using all these existing things, I think we can solve almost 20 to 30% of the problem. 1,100 people are the owner of all these buses. So 1,100 people rushing to grab one passenger every day. For that reason, they don't have quality buses. They are fighting. And very interesting thing we found. Anywhere anybody pick up his hand, they used to pick him into the bus. But যখন কেউ রাস্তার মাঝখানে নামতে চায় তখন কিন্তু তাকে ধাক্কা দিয়ে রাস্তায় নামিয়ে দেওয়া হয়, কারণ বাস থামানোটাই লস। দিস ইজ হ্যাপেনিং অল দ্য টাইম। আমরা এই প্রবলেমটি সলভ করতে পারি দুটি পদ্ধতিতে, দুটি প্যারালাল থিং। আমরা প্রায় বলি ঢাকা শহর থেকে রিক্সা তুলে দিতে হবে, এটা তুলে দিতে হবে, ওটা। নো, ইউ জাস্ট প্রোভাইড কোয়ালিটি বাস সার্ভিস, কোয়ালিটি বাস সার্ভিস। নট অনলি দ্যাট, এটা শুধু করলেই হবে না, এই বাস থেকে নেমে আপনার বাসা পর্যন্ত পৌঁছানোর সব নিশ্চয়তা দিতে হবে। আপনার মানিব্যাগটি চুরি হলে আপনি আবার আপনার প্রাইভেট গাড়ি নিয়ে চলাচল করবেন। আপনার মেয়েকে টিচ করলে আপনি আবার আপনার প্রাইভেট গাড়ি নিয়ে চলাচল করবেন। সো সিকিউরিটি, পাবলিক ট্রান্সপোর্ট অ্যান্ড সেফটি অ্যান্ড সিকিউরিটি গোজ টুগেদার। উইদাউট ওয়ান ইউ ক্যানট সলভ দ্য প্রবলেম। আমরা একটি স্টাডি করে দেখেছি ঢাকা শহরে এই যে 50টি করে গাড়ি প্রতিদিন কেনা হচ্ছে, তার 80% কেনা হচ্ছে for the sake of their children to take them to the school. So you provide quality bus service with 100%, I must say, the 100% security, especially in Dhaka city where Prime Minister, President, and Chief Justice is to stay. And you can provide that, and you have to provide that. And if you can do that, almost all the problems you can solve without investing money, just through proper planning. So I think every one of us will think about it. So which one should be first implemented? Not the flyover, but the footpath and the road is the primary requirement of us. So we have to do it. Stop making flyover for Mubashir. Thank you.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ মহাশয়, আপনি শেষ কথাগুলি খুব ভালো বলেছেন। আমি এই সময়ে আগামীকালের জন্য এবং আজকের এই সেশনের জন্য একটা অ্যানাউন্সমেন্ট আছে, হোসেন জিল্লুর সাহেবকে সেটা করার জন্য দিচ্ছি।
অত্যন্ত প্রিয় একটা কাজ, ওপেন ডিসকাশন, ওই স্লট উই হ্যাভ টু কার্টেল ফর দিস সেশন। কালকে আমরা ইয়ে করব, উই উইল, সরি কেউ কি ইয়ে তুলছিলেন না? কালকে আমরা চেষ্টা করব না, আমরা করব এই আপনারা যেই সেশনগুলো শুনছেন একটা স্লট বের করার জন্য যেখানে মূলত ওপেন ডিসকাশনের জন্যই থাকবে। তো আজকে আমি অনুরোধ করছি এই সেশন থেকে আমরা ওপেন ডিসকাশন শেষ করি, কারণ এরপরে একটা ইন্টারেস্টিং সেশন আছে অন স্লাম রিয়ালিটিস। তো এখন আমি চেয়ার প্রফেসর সিকান্দার খানকে চেয়ার সাম করার জন্য অনুরোধ করছি।
ধন্যবাদ। আসলে যে তিনটি উপস্থাপনা আমরা শুনলাম, এগুলোর উপরে প্রথমটির উপরে আমার মনে হয় অনেক কিছু বলার আছে, এবং সেগুলো না বলেই শুধু এইটুকু বলি যে তিনি যে সমস্ত জিনিসগুলো পছন্দ করেছেন ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক হিসেবে সার্ভে করার জন্য, সেগুলো অত্যন্ত রেলিভেন্ট, এবং যে সিদ্ধান্তগুলো বা যে ফাইন্ডিংসগুলো আমরা শুনলাম সেগুলো আসলে আমাদের প্রত্যহিক অভিজ্ঞতা, এবং আমরা যারা শহরে বাস করি, আমি শিওর এখানে আমরা প্রায় সবাই শহরে বাস করি, এ কথাগুলোকে তিনি আসলে তথ্য আকারে আমাদের কাছে তুলে নিয়ে এসছেন, তার জন্য ধন্যবাদ। একই কথা অ্যাবাউট হেলথ, অ্যাবাউট ট্রান্সপোর্ট, সত্য। হেলথে দুষ্যন্ত বাবুকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই, আর আক্তার মাহমুদকে ট্রান্সপোর্ট ইন ঢাকা সিটি যেভাবে তিনি অ্যানালাইজ করেছেন সেটার জন্য তাকে ধন্যবাদ জানাই। আমি নিজে কিন্তু অর্থনীতির শিক্ষক হলেও অর্থনীতি এখন আর পড়াই না। এখন আমি চিটাগং একটা ফোরাম আছে, ফোরাম ফর প্ল্যান্ড চিটাগং, সেখান থেকে আমরা বলি যে আমরা সরকারকে এটা দাও ওটা করো এরকম দাবি তুলব না। আমরা যেটা বলবো সেটা হচ্ছে যে প্ল্যানগুলি টাকা কড়ি দিয়ে বিদেশি সংস্থাদের সাহায্য নিয়ে প্রণয়ন করা হয়েছে, আপনি যখন কাজ করতে যাবেন তখন সেই প্ল্যানগুলোর পাতা উল্টে দেখবেন, সেখানে এক কথা লেখা আছে, অন্য কাজটি করবেন না। এই জিনিসটি আমরা করার জন্য ফোরাম করেছিলাম 20 বছর আগে। আমার এক অতীতের চট্টগ্রামের অনেকের নাম শুনে থাকবেন, প্রফেসর জামাল নজরুল ইসলাম, উনি আন্তর্জাতিক খ্যাতিসম্পন্ন একজন বিজ্ঞানী, তিনি ইনিশিয়েট করেছিলেন। আর্কিটেক্টস, ইঞ্জিনিয়ার্স, সোশ্যাল সায়েন্টিস্ট এবং বিভিন্ন লাইনের মানুষ ওখানে এখনও আছেন। আমরা সবসময় এটাই বলি, কিন্তু আমাদের অভিজ্ঞতা হচ্ছে এটা বলার জন্য বলা, কাজ যাদের করার তারা তাদের মতোই করেন। আমি চট্টগ্রাম ডেভেলপমেন্ট অথরিটি যেটা আছে সেটার কথাই বলি শুধু। মোবাশ্বির সাহেব বলেছেন প্ল্যানিংয়ের কথা, ওই অর্গানাইজেশনটার নাম হওয়ার কথা ছিল CPDA, কিন্তু সেটা চলছে CDA নামে। CDA মানে চিটাগং ডেভেলপমেন্ট অথরিটি, আর CPDA মানে চিটাগং প্ল্যানিং অ্যান্ড ডেভেলপমেন্ট অথরিটি। ওই জিনিসটা নাই। এবং সেই যে ব্রিটিশ ODA এর পয়সা নিয়ে তারা মাস্টার প্ল্যান করেছিল 1995 সালে, আনটিল 2015 এই প্ল্যান চলার কথা। সেখানে লেখা আছে যে এই পিরিয়ডের মধ্যে চট্টগ্রামে কোনো ফ্লাইওভার দরকার হবে না। আর আপনি দেখবেন চট্টগ্রামে 2015 সালের মধ্যে অনেকগুলি ফ্লাইওভার হয়ে গেছে, এবং সরকারের মন্ত্রী একজন বলেছেন যে এই ফ্লাইওভারের কাছে আমি দাঁড়িয়ে দেখেছি, 1 ঘন্টার মধ্যে তেমন চোখে পড়ার মতো গাড়ি ঘোড়া দৌড়াতে দেখিনি। এটা কক্সবাজার দিকে যাইতে পারে। সেই মানুষই আবার কিছুদিন পরে, বিকজ অফ আই ডোন্ট নো হোয়াট হ্যাপেন ইন বিটুইন, বলছে যে এখন এই ফ্লাইওভার চট্টগ্রাম এয়ারপোর্ট পর্যন্ত যাবে। এখন এয়ারপোর্ট পর্যন্ত চট্টগ্রামের ওটা যাওয়ার কি দরকার? আমাদের ফোরাম থেকে যারা ইঞ্জিনিয়ার আছেন তারা হিসাব করে বলেছেন যে চট্টগ্রামের যারা এই রাস্তা ব্যবহার করে তাদের 0.05% মানুষ এই জায়গা থেকে এয়ারপোর্টে যায়। তো সুতরাং পুরো জায়গাটা আপনি এই যে চট্টগ্রামের যে রাস্তাটি দিয়ে এয়ারপোর্টে আপনারা অনেকেই গেছেন জানেন, এটা ছেড়ে দেওয়া হবে এখন ফ্লাইওভার দিয়ে। এগুলো বলে তো বেশি লাভ হবে না। যারা এই কাজটি করছেন, হোসেন জিল্লুর রহমান সাহেব অত্যন্ত উদ্যোগী মানুষ, সমস্যাগুলো সামনে নিয়ে এসে সেগুলো ব্যাখ্যা বিশ্লেষণ করার জন্য আমাদেরকে সুযোগ করে দিয়েছেন। যারা এটার সঙ্গে যুক্ত হয়ে কাগজগুলো তৈরি করেছেন এবং আমরা যারা তাদের আহ্বানে সাড়া দিয়ে এখানে এসেছি, আমরা সবাই একটি কথা শেষ কথা বলতে হবে যে প্ল্যানিংকে মানতে হবে। বর্তমানে আমাদের প্ল্যানিং সেটাকে ফলো করার চেয়ে বরং সেটাকে ভায়োলেট করাটাই একটা ইতে দাঁড়িয়েছে, কমন একটা এক্সপিরিয়েন্স আমাদের। তো আমার আর এমন কিছু বলার নেই, আমি নিজে এটা করি বলে বাড়তি কথাগুলো বললাম। আশা করি এগুলো আমাদের এই কাগজগুলোতে কোনো না কোনো জায়গায় যুক্ত হতে পারবে। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you, Professor Sikandar Khan, and thank you to all the speakers. The third and last session for today's conference is on slum realities. I would like to call on stage the chair of this session, Nazrul Slum, founder of the Center for Urban Studies, along with the other presenters.